Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales Institute, and I am thrilled to welcome you today to our webinar on Data Center Lead Generation 101. If you haven't already, please let us know in the chat pane where you're joining us from. Today, we're going to be talking about strategies to help you grow your leads, grow your sales opportunities, grow your new customers, your new clients, your new sources of revenue throughout the entire buyer's journey. And it doesn't matter whether you're joining us from a data center operator like a colocation, wholesale, hyperscale, modular, or edge provider, or whether you're from a technology or facilities company that sells to or partners with data center companies, or a construction or real estate company, or sales or marketing company that sells to and partners with data centers. If you are looking to get more leads, more of the right decision makers, more of the right future clients into your world, into your CRM, into your funnel, you are definitely in the right place. You're really in for a treat today. So first up, we're going to start by, let me switch this over so you can. So first, just some quick introductions. For those of you that don't know me, I am Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I help companies in and around the data center industry differentiate, get found much earlier in the buyer's journey, achieve trusted advisor status, and command premium pricing to be able to scale more profitably. You may have seen me at some of the more popular industry conferences in and around the data center industry. I've also served in some leadership roles with some product and IT entrepreneurial sales and marketing related organizations. I'm a former contractor for both IBM and Microsoft. I've been involved in the HubSpot solution provider partner community for well over a decade, led a HubSpot user group for 4 years. And I bring more than 20 years of experience in and around the data center industry, including and especially within colocation and wholesale, as well as construction, cooling, decommissioning, IT asset and disposition, cybersecurity, managed services, a ton of work with software companies, both traditional software and SaaS, especially AI SaaS and telecommunications. Again, DCSMI is all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. Whenever I plan a webinar like this, I want to make sure that the content is very focused on delivering as much value as possible towards you. So you'll notice when you register for a webinar like this, most of the time you're going to see what is your biggest sales and marketing challenge. And I take the aggregate of that and we put it all together. We figure out what the most common challenges that people are grappling with, and that's going to help guide some of the Q&A today. If there's additional questions that you have that come up during today's webinar, please feel free to put those in the question pane in StreamYard, and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as possible. So what is on the agenda for today? We're going to start by talking about what it takes to modernize your lead generation strategy relative to the big picture of achieving best practices around data center lead generation 101. Then we'll turn our attention to providing the right kinds of incentives. I see a lot of companies in the data center marketplace really struggle with this one. We'll look at how to overcome the stigma associated with sales and the general allergy in the marketplace towards spending time with people in a sales context and what you can do about it to escape from the vendor box. Next, we'll talk about what it takes to collaborate on game-changing lead generation campaigns across multiple stakeholders within your company. Next, we'll move on to what it takes to accelerate the sales cycle. Then we'll talk about what it takes to focus on the most impactful lead generation campaigns. We'll look at some techniques, some strategies, some tips that you can use to measure what is still measurable and iterate. And if that seems like an awful lot to cover in a 30-minute webinar, it is. I'm going to be moving at a pretty fast pace. One of the questions that we always get is, will the recording be available? Yes, if you are registered and attending this webinar, you will for sure be getting the recording so you can watch it to review anything that we talked about today. I also strongly encourage that if there's other people on your go-to-market team that should have been here but couldn't quite make it, companies that learn together grow together. So if you want to use this recording as an alignment tool to Make sure that other stakeholders across your sales, marketing, customer success, product function, channel partnerships, your executive sponsor, by all means, feel free to use the recording for that purpose. And I also want to make sure to let you know towards the end of today's webinar, I'll be introducing you to some recommended resources, and there will be a special offer for those of you that are with us on the webinar, and then we'll transition into the question and answer session. So to set the stage on what it takes to modernize your lead generation strategy relative to best practices around data center lead generation 101, let's set some context. Those of you that haven't been following current events in the last year or so, AI is a really big deal. A lot of the growth around large language models and artificial intelligence is powering most of the future anticipated growth and current growth in and around the data center ecosystem. So much so that Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, is predicting that there's $1 trillion forecasted to go into data center upgrades over the next 4 years. It's going to be heavily concentrated among the hyperscale providers, but will also tend to trickle down to the entire ecosystem, which is great news for all of us. Michael Dell is equally as bullish on the prospects for data center growth. Dell is predicting a 100-fold increase in data center demand over the next 10 years. And I was just talking with someone about this yesterday. What I've noticed anecdotally is I see a lot more mainstream media outlets, mainstream financial news outlets having stories about the data center industry. It used to be just a couple times a year. Now it seems almost every week. CNBC, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, they're all covering, CNN, the Today Show, they're all covering this industry. I saw the Today Show just had a feature on this morning about artificial intelligence. However, we don't expect these gains to be evenly distributed. Why? Because buyer preferences, the buyer's journey has changed so much in recent years. We now are very much in a world where it's very self-propelled, very much self-service. The buyer is now in the driver's seat. This is the remote control of our lives. The smartphone really and digital media. Just to put this in context, Gartner recently found that as much as 83% of the buyer's journey is likely over before you get to meet a prospect. That means 83% of the researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens before someone from your sales team has any engagement whatsoever with a prospect. And that is a really big change. If we were having this conversation 10 years ago, and I've been talking about lead generation best practices for data centers for the better part of 10 years, that number used to be 56%. Corporate Executive Board, CEB, that was acquired by Gartner a few years back, the number at the time was about half of the buyer's journey was over before you met prospects, before prospects talked with someone on your sales team. Now it's almost entirely over. To put it in the context of sports analogies, if you're a football or soccer or baseball or soccer basketball fan, like 3/4 of the game, you're in the 4th quarter of the game before you meet a prospect. If you're a baseball fan, you're like in the bottom of the 8th inning before you're allowed into the stadium to engage with prospects. That's a tough road to hoe. That's what we're going to be talking about today, is strategies for you to be more effective in this new reality. And this isn't just edge cases. McKinsey found 70 to 80% of decision makers now prefer a digital journey. LinkedIn has overwhelmingly found with its B2B Institute and working in partnership with Edelman that thought leadership, content, sales enablement is what's necessary to cut through the noise. But it's getting pretty crowded. If your company has sat on the sidelines for the last 10 years and hasn't been doing videos and webinars and ebooks and lead generation and been active on LinkedIn, yes, you need to be there like yesterday, but don't expect to show up the first week and be competitive with everyone else that's been building up for over the last 10 years. So cutting through the noise is one of the bigger challenges, and we'll introduce you to some strategies to do that today. One of the most effective ways is to get a really good handle on your buyer personas, who you sell to and why they should care about listening to you. What you see there up on the screen is part of a buyer persona for a CTO or a CIO, CTO, CIO, Oscar. You can see some titles and some certifications in there. If you sell to CFOs, they have completely different goals, completely different challenges, different watering holes, different resources, different publications, different sources of influence. COOs think a little bit differently too. Data center CEOs, if you sell to operators, like colos or wholesale or hyperscale, they're wired to think a little bit differently. What's super important is to be able to develop this extreme sense of empathy, of walking a mile, a kilometer in their shoes, of understanding what are the goals that your buyer personas need to get right to make their company successful, to earn a promotion? And what if they mess up? What are their biggest challenges that could really derail their company's growth, threaten their career? What are the massive things that are stressing them out, causing them to have to do all-nighters, lose time away from their friends and loved ones, missing out on vacation time? And a lot of it comes down to understanding that although there's largely thought to be 28 touch points between a complete stranger and purchase decision, at the back of the napkin, good way to get started is to think about these 3 buckets. How are you going to have presence in the awareness stage of the journey, the consideration stage of the journey, the decision stage of the journey? During awareness, there's a goal, there's a challenge, there's a question, there's a frustration, and that buyer persona needs answers. Where are they going for answers? They're going to search, they're going to Siri, Alexa, Google, Cortana, of course, Copilot. They're asking their friends and their colleagues on social media. They're going to YouTube, they're watching videos. And if you show up, congratulations, you have a foot in the door. And they're like, oh, wow, this is really helpful. Who are these folks? What do they do? Oh, cool. The consideration stage is in the middle. They've gotten a little further along. They're getting a little more fine-tuned about giving their solution that they're looking for a name. So there's like a category of different things that they may be looking at, but they're still not focused on companies. The decision stage is where most people that aren't doing lead generation effectively well, the decision stage is where they show up. In other words, they're showing up to the fourth quarter of the game when all of the action has already happened. They're showing up to the fourth quarter of the game when all of the prospects have been learning and attending webinars and downloading ebooks and getting nurtured and educated and building up trust and everything with all of these different sources of influence, these teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts. If you're able to get found early, great. You're setting your company up for success. If you're not, and you're only found at the end, if you actually manage to get found at the end at all, well, you're setting yourself up to be commoditized, and that's not a great place to be. So what can we do about it? Well, for starters, you need to self-assess how many of these touch points you're currently covering. Of the 28 touch points between awareness and decision, at the risk of oversimplification, think of like 12 of those touch points happening in awareness, where they're doing self-guided research. Another roughly half, 11 touch points happening in consideration, where they're starting to compare the different options, and 5 touch points are happening in the decision stage. If you do an amazing job with events or fields marketing, and if you're actually attracting the right people to those events and fields marketing, you're probably covering 1 or 2 or 3 of those touch points pretty well. But what about the other 24, 25, 26, 27 touch points that are there that shape the purchase decision? For a lot of companies, they're still not even doing a great job with covering the decision stage. If this applies to your company, I do some soul searching about where your priorities are around growth to make sure that you're showing up for the digital journey. So the best practices around modernizing your lead generation strategy is, first, think about what you're doing on your website today to convert more visitors to leads. That doesn't mean it's going to work forever. We know that large language models, AI, ChatGPT, we know at some point the traditional search results page that's been around for 20, 25 years is going to change, but it hasn't changed quite yet. We're not sure it's going to change as aggressively as the prognosticators are predicting. And if you have a good balanced lead generation strategy, you're probably investing a lot in video. So YouTube ends up essentially being the backdoor into search anyway. So what are you doing to convert visitors into leads? What are you doing to show extreme empathy to make it all about them? Not what you want, but what they want. And what can you do to accelerate the sales cycle? Next up, how can we make sure that we are providing the right kinds of incentives that help our lead generation program? Let's first make sure that we're on the same page, because a lot of people use the word leads synonymously with opportunities, when they're really 2 different things. If you look at the diagram there on the left-hand side of the screen, before we can have leads, typically we have visitors or traffic or subscribers. Some leads advance to being marketing qualified leads. Some of those advance to being sales qualified leads, sometimes known as SQLs or sales accepted, SALs. Percentage of those will progress to opportunities. A lot of people that don't have a advanced lead generation or big lead generation program or investment in their company tend to use leads and opportunities synonymously. But if you're going to be successful collaborating internally or externally with different stakeholders, you need to get on the same page about what you're actually talking about. And of course, a percentage of those opportunities should be closable, should move to close one, so they become customers and new sources of revenue. Hopefully, most of those will become promoters and evangelists that are incredibly delighted with what you do and spread positive digital word of mouth. And then there's another bucket. But yeah, if you need to work with colleagues or bosses or other teams or have a CRM, it's really vital that you get aligned on life cycle stages. Now, most awareness and consideration lead generation programs require content. And this is about when I give this talk where the sales professionals start to shut down and they say, content, schmontent, that's marketing's job. I don't need to worry about content. Well, 10 years ago, you'd probably be right. Today, it's a little bit different. But let's start it. And again, and this contextualizing this, if you work for a really large company with hyper specialized roles, and by really large companies, like a minimum of 500 plus employees or 1,000 plus employees, we have the luxury of a really deep bench of talent, dozens of people that are worried about executing and refining and optimizing your lead generation program. You may not have to get as deeply involved in the lead generation strategy and collaborating across other teams within your company. For those of you that are from companies that have anywhere from 50 to 200 employees, you will still likely need to get involved in a lot of these areas. Below 50, if you're not involved in these areas, it's not going to work. So the smaller the company is, the more important it is that you're able to play a lot of different positions and wear a lot of different hats to make this successful. But at the end of the day, to get your lead generation working effectively, you need to be able to connect the dots between who that person is, what they care about, and something that's enticing enough for them to click on it, fill out a form, tell you who they are, and begin a relationship with your company. So, for example, if you're selling to facilities managers, maybe you're talking about the definitive guide to nuclear power. If you sell to data center managers, maybe you're talking about the future of being a data center manager in the AI era. If you sell to SaaS CFOs, software as a service chief financial officers, maybe you're going to answer the perpetual issue of comparing public cloud to colocation and address this whole big repatriation conversation that's going on. Or maybe your company is doing something related to cooling or power, and you're talking about the state of data center sustainability based on some new research you've done. But the most important thing at a high level is to think about how you position your sales professionals and your CS professionals, your customer success professionals, account management professionals, more as consultants and teachers, trusted advisors, and subject matter experts, not just people that are delivering a sales pitch. When it comes to putting up forms that ask people for information, it's super important that the value that you're providing is proportional to how much data you're asking for. Again, the value is in the eye of the beholder. A CFO, CTO, COO, CEO, they care about, and depending on their business model, their size, their industry, they care about vastly different issues. But let's assume you got the strategy right. To make sure that you're optimizing and the delicate balancing act of asking for more information to better qualify someone and keeping a reasonably high conversion rate, don't overdo it in your early awareness stage lead generation offers. At the end of the day, there'll be some people that completely ungate this content and have no form in front of it. Some people will put up a single field just asking for business email address. Some people will ask a little more. But essentially, when you're doing lead generation on your website, you're asking for someone to trade their business card for what's on the other side of the landing page form. Keep this proportional. Lower perceived value offers like a 1 or 2 page planning guide or an ebook, fewer questions, and certainly less intrusive questions. Webinars, higher perceived value, a free training class, a free training workshop, a free conference. Naturally, the higher the perceived value of the offer, the more you can ask for to better qualify that person. So make sure when it comes to best practices around lead generation 101 for in and around the data center industry, that you're providing the right kind of incentives, which starts with being very focused on content value, being seen as a teacher, a trusted advisor, and an educator. So you're creating remarkable persona-driven premium content. It's all about them, not about what you want, but what they want, because no one's going to, for the most part, be ready to bring you behind the curtain, give you a seat at the table, tell you what's really going on until you've educated and build it up trust with them. And the way you transact this, and I hesitate to use the word transaction because too many people in the data center industry are still focused on transactions over relationships. But the way you trade value is through forms. It's essentially how you're monetizing that attention. So third, what can we do to overcome the sales stigma and escape from the vendor box that plagues so many people before they even get started? Well, let's be realistic about trusted professions and untrusted professions. And in the whole scheme of things, sales professionals just don't have the same kind of professional esteem as nurses, doctors, grade school teachers, members of the military. So we want to make sure that we do whatever we can to improve how we position ourselves, how we position our teams, to escape from the vendor box. So we're seen more as like the elevated role of like a big four consultant, as opposed to a transactional, commission hungry, commoditized technology salesperson. So the most important part of doing this the right way to overcome the sales stigma, to generate higher quality leads, is to do whatever you can to be seen as a thought leader in the space, to be seen as a teacher, a trusted advisor, a consultant, as a subject matter expert. And if you're very, very early on to working in the data center industry and you don't think you meet the bar yet as being a teacher, a consultant, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, and your company doesn't yet have a program in place to help you overcome that gap, then my advice would be to be the best tour guide on the planet, the best concierge possible when it comes to steering your prospects and your clients towards great sources of thought leadership within your company. Next up, what does it take to collaborate on successful lead generation campaigns throughout your company? Again, it's super important to be mindful of the full buyer's journey. Most of the time when people come to me for a consultation and they're relatively new to this, there is literally one or two places on the entire website for a hot prospect to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm kind of sort of interested. There's a contact us page and maybe a demo or talk to sales or something like that. And the problem is with going so threadbare with that approach, is you're ignoring like 80-90% of the people that could be a fantastic fit next week, next month, but aren't quite ready for a conversation today. So it's super important that we have lead generation offers that cover the full journey and that cover each of our prioritized buyer personas. It's another problem too, is I ask people about buyer personas and they put their entire lunch out on the table. They're literally like 9, 10, 12 prioritized buyer personas. I'm like, okay, it's nice that you have those, but you're starting from scratch. So there's limited resources. We got to pick the favorite child. You know, as parents, you're never supposed to pick the favorite child, but when it comes to allocating resources for go-to-market, there's got to be a prioritized buyer persona, a primary buyer persona, maybe a secondary buyer persona, perhaps a tertiary buyer persona. It's super, super important that we know where our efforts are going to be focused. So in traditional sales and marketing roles, sales would be involved in the decision stage, and marketing would own the awareness and the consideration stages. And sales development reps, SDRs, would typically go back and forth and kind of be the shuttle between those two parts of the buyer's journey. However, that's not really a great idea anymore, given that your prospects really don't want to spend time with salespeople until the absolute end of the buyer's journey. So we need to figure out a way for your prospects to spend time with folks on your team, aside from just the marketers. And there's a couple creative ways to be able to do this. The first mindset issue is to think about how to get marketing involved, staying not just in the early stages of the journey, but throughout the full buyer's journey, all the way to the point of revenue generation. And along the same lines, your sales professionals, at least part of the week, at least part of the month now need to be spent collaborating with marketing to come back much earlier on into the journey than they ever have in the past. And they need to do this in a context, in a way, so that individually and as a team and as a company, you're seen as the go-to experts in your space. I like to call this go-to-market strategy, GTM strategy, as a team sport. And the way to get set up for success with this is to be super clear about who the most important buyer personas are that your company is selling to. Is it CTO Tom? Is it CFO Fred? Is it compliance Connie? Maybe that's even the order of priority at which you're allocating resources for your educational content lead generation priorities. And then think about how you're going to reach each of those kinds of buyers in a meaningful way so that you're seen as the go-to expert in the space. What are you going to do for lead generation in each of the three stages in each of those three buyer personas? So yes, you end up with a tic-tac-toe board, 9 boxes that have to be filled at the absolute minimum to have a decent chance of being competitive in the data center marketplace. And if you think you're being competitive, I'd encourage you to look at your direct and indirect and non-business model competitors to see what they are doing. When we're competing on a global scale, there's a really good chance that you may have a very different opinion of your competitiveness than the data would actually suggest. To collaborate well, one of the things that I've seen work really, really effectively in and around the data center industry is concentrating on what I call a video-first approach. 10 years ago, because video was really expensive, really complicated, really time consuming, video was done last, and you built up weeks over planning and storyboarding and everything like that. Now that everyone has a video studio with them, in their pocket all the time, that they're checking dozens or hundreds of times a day, we all have the ability to do video to a certain degree. So I encourage you to think about a video first approach, where you start with that at the beginning of the creative content developing process. And when you do this the right way, you start with a video shoot, video content. That's your first asset. You can repurpose audio from that relatively easily if you want to be podcasting, although the definition of podcasting is certainly morphing beyond just audio only now, as a lot more people do video podcasts. And then you can repurpose from that fairly straightforward into text-based content, long-form content like ebooks and reports and papers and things like that, medium form content like pillar content pages and blog posts, and then short form content like in email marketing and social posts and things along those lines. But the cool part with all of this is when you're dealing with subject matter experts who can afford to spend a little bit of time, maybe you can get their attention for a half hour once a month, a half hour twice a month. This is a very time economical way of doing things, because from a single video shoot with a single session with your subject matter expert, you can do a tremendous amount of lead generation. A good way to think about the collaboration on this is think about a Venn diagram at the intersection of product, customer success, account management, sales, marketing, and potentially with channel. You may want to take a screenshot of this particular slide if you're running into challenges getting the right collaboration going to build your thought leadership team. Next up, in terms of sales cycle acceleration, again, we need to be mindful of the buyer's journey. We need to be mindful of buyer preferences. And we need to look at a tactical level as what's going on with our lead generation offers once somebody hits the submit, download, register. What page is showing up? And on that page, do we have sales cycle accelerators that take them to the next step in the journey, what we're anticipating to be the next logical step that a buyer persona like this would need to see? And is this reinforced by the email confirmation? And have we thought through the tic-tac-toe board of making sure that we've prioritized our primary, secondary, tertiary buyer personas, and we make sure that we have a good lead generation program, a good lead generation strategy for each of our most important personas throughout the full journey? So to embrace the magic of calls to action, what's often called CTAs, map the journey from awareness to consideration to decision, and be prepared to use CTAs, calls to action, as directional signs. Those little buttons that you use throughout your emails and your blogs and your website and your social media and paid social and paid search. It's all about taking a source of traffic and moving them to an offer that's most relevant to who that person. So what can we do to accelerate things? We need to be super aware of who they are, where they are, what we want to suggest them to do next. To focus your attention on the most impactful lead generation, I'd encourage you to take a look at the volume of lead generation offers that you've created. You can see some screenshots here from some of the bigger data center operators like CyrusOne. They're showing 46 pages in the resource library. I don't know if that means 460 offers, or maybe there's 20 or 25 on a page, but that's a lot of resources that are going on there. You can see a screenshot here from Equinix, from Involta, from DataBank. Again, if you think that you're competitive with what's going on in the marketplace, look around. Because over time, most companies will publish to a lot of digital marketing channels. They have a lot of resources. But how do you know that your best performing channels are sending those visitors to the best performing lead generation offers? It's a little bit like being a traffic director. It's a little bit like being an air traffic controller. It's a little bit like being an orchestra conductor. But our goal at the end of the day is to match the traffic source with the most impactful lead generation offer with a CTA. So your blogs, your email, your social, your paid search, anything that you're doing with the traffic source, we want to think about how do we get that person to the most relevant lead generation offer that we possibly have. And then over time, we want to monitor the clicks. We want to monitor the conversions and the revenue, obviously prioritizing revenue, repeat what works, deprioritize what's not working so we get smarter over time. Which brings us to the final area that we're going to cover today with data center lead generation. For how do we measure what is still measurable and iterate and improve over time? For more than 20 years, success with digital marketing was measured and optimized using tracking cookies. However, there's a problem with tracking cookies. They've become the bad guys. Tracking cookies were also used for retargeting. They were used for profiling. They were used for manipulating people during political elections, some really evil purposes that led to a lot of governments and a lot of nations saying enough is enough. This led to cookie blockers. This has led to government regulation. And now third-party cookies are really, really on their way out pretty quickly. Apple's already taken steps a couple of years ago. Google Alphabet was supposed to take steps at around the same time. They've put it off a little bit down the road, but not very far. We know third-party cookies have seen their better days. So in this environment, how can you still measure lead generation effectiveness? You can't do it as well as you did 10 years ago. There's a lot going on dark social that's going to be impossible to measure with digital word of mouth and communities and ecosystems. But the first party data is becoming way more valuable. This is the data that lives in your CRM. Some workarounds for this is always now going forward, ask people, how did you hear about us? You'll notice on a lot of our forums that's there. That gives you individual data, it gives you aggregate data in your CRM in order for someone to set up a deal, to advance a deal, and throughout the deal stages to get to the next level. You can certainly make it mandated that they've asked that question and filled it in, and certainly your ops people can audit, confirm, compile this together and report on what's working, even assisted with some AI tools. So measure what's still measurable and iterate. So we talked about modernizing your lead generation strategy, how to provide the right kind of incentives, how to overcome sales stigma and escape from the vendor box, what it takes to collaborate on game-changing lead generation programs, some ideas for accelerating sales cycles. We just talked about how to focus on the most impactful lead generation, as well as how to measure what is still measurable and iterate and improve over time. Before we wrap up for today, I want to introduce you to some recommended resources that are super important if you've started to realize that your prospects and clients have changed how they research and purchase technology, digital technology, infrastructure technology. We know the stats. We know this is very real. We're experiencing it all firsthand. And yet, most companies in and around the data center industry are completely unprepared to confront this once in a generation change. I don't think it's just once in 25. It's like a once in 50 or once in 100 year. This is as big of a transformation as not just the addition of the phones and the tablets, but the internet in general. So going back like 25 years. So if your team is still living in the past and your sales team is spending a lot of effort begging for meetings on LinkedIn with cold emails and cold calls and things like that, just to be able to pitch your products, it's time to know that there is a better way to be able to be top of mind where your prospects are already hanging out on webinars and social and search and streaming videos and review websites and asking questions all day long with their digital assistants. These changes also they can be challenges, they can be frustrating in a lot of contexts, but they also open up a lot of opportunities to be seen more as experts, teachers, trusted advisors, and thought leaders. Now, today you've gotten a sample about 20 minutes from Go-to-Market Strategy Reboot Camp, which includes 11 hours of on-demand video training, over 49 lessons within 8 units, and 118 downloadable worksheets and checklists. You can learn all about the details on our website at dcsmi.com/course, and we'll drop that into the chat pane as well. This is based on more than 20 years of consulting and advising with more than 150 founders, CEOs, chief revenue marketing officers, and go-to-market teams, distilled down into about a day and a half of super affordable on-demand video training. And whenever I bump into people at conferences, I've been creating tools and resources and training materials for IT service providers for probably about 25 years now, going back to the days when the resources used to come on a CD-ROM in the back of the book, like the book I read for Microsoft Press in the late 90s. And the crazy part is I'll run into people, and then like long after you would have figured that content would have been through its shelf life, they're telling me they still have the templates sitting on their notebooks, sitting on their Google Drive, on their Dropbox, they're still using it. Actually, someone just dropped a recommendation on my LinkedIn profile a couple of weeks ago, exactly to that effect. It's crazy, the shelf life of how valuable these standard operating procedures and tools and resources tend to be. So as you can see there up on the screen, there's an outline for that. You can see that up on the website as well, with the 8 modules that Go-to-Market Strategy Reboot Camp covers. It's all about the right people in the right places at the right time and in the right context, so that you're seen as a teacher, a thought leader, a subject matter expert, a consultant, and trusted advisor. This course is available all the time on our website at dcsmi.com/course for $500. But I don't want you to have to buy it because you can get the course enrollment for free today. Here's how that works. When you sign up for our data center go-to-market diagnostic workshop at dcsmi.com/consulting, we're prepared to give you a free enrollment, a free single user, single student enrollment in the Go-to-Market Strategy Reboot Camp as a new client welcome gift. That again has a $500 value, and the diagnostic workshop's only $250. The fine print on this is it's only going to be available through this week, through Friday, May 10th. You need to be registered for the Data Center Lead Generation 101 webinar. There's only 8 of these available. It actually takes quite a bit. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to be able to deliver these diagnostic workshops and make sure that you give us a full business day to add you into the learning management system so you get access to the course. So that's Data Center Lead Generation 101. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI. I got some questions that were sent in ahead of time that we're going to address. I'm also looking here at the chat pane, and we'll try to address as many of those questions as possible. I'm cognizant of the fact that we're a little past time, but if you're good, I'm good to hang around for another 5-10 minutes. If you need to bolt, no worries. We'll be sending out the recording. So the first question that we got here is, what can we do to improve lead generation? Well, that's kind of the focus of everything we've been talking about today. The most important advice that I can impart on you is when it comes to lead generation, it all starts with understanding who it is that you want to generate leads from. It starts at the company level, because most of you are probably selling like small business or mid-market or enterprise deals where you have a defined list of companies you want to reach, like account-based marketing. Maybe you're selling at a lower price point, and maybe you're selling more mainstream, but it generally starts by having a profile, an ideal client profile of the kind of companies you want to sell to, and then within that client profile, the kinds of individuals that you need to build a relationship with, that you need to generate leads from. And that's where the prioritized buyer personas come in, the primary buyer persona, the secondary buyer persona, and understand what's going on in each of those folks' worlds, their biggest goals, their biggest challenges. Your whole lead generation strategy needs to be about grabbing somebody through the web, through the virtual shirt collar, and pulling them in, and being able to educate and build trust with scale in a way that earns you the ability to stay with them throughout their buyer's journey. That's the single most important part of getting your lead gen strategy right, is focusing on who it is that you want to generate these leads with, what's going on in their world, and how can you exude massive amounts of trust and thought leadership and credibility so that they want to hang out with you, so you're not begging them for attention. Once you have that attention, yeah, you need to cover the full journey. We need to win them over. We need to earn their trust in the awareness stage. We need to have email marketing, and at the risk of sounding really meta, a webinar program or other kinds of events, so they want to spend time with us throughout their full journey in the consideration stage. And it's a very natural for them to say, oh, well, I've learned so much from this company already. They're fantastic people. I can't wait to do business with them. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about what the next steps look like. When you do that the right way, it's seamless, and you'll start to recognize patterns. So this starts by looking at your biggest success stories. This starts by looking at your case studies, and looking at who's had the best customer success experience, and reverse engineering how you're going to get more customers like that, more clients like that, more potential partners like that, and building a lead generation strategy around that. But at the end of the day, lead generation, to have a relationship throughout the full buyer's journey, depends on content. And content starts with extreme empathy and extreme understanding of what's going on in their world, and how you can add value, how you can put deposits into the relationship bank account before you try to withdraw. Let's see, looks like we have time for one more question. How do we find product market fit for our technology? How do we find PMF, product market fit for our technology? It's super interesting to be answering that in a webinar on lead generation. I'll tell you why in a sec. So the idea of product market fit was first introduced and popularized by product managers and technology companies about 10, 15 years ago. Venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, folks like Eric Ries and the Lean Startup and Steve Blank. And the idea is product market fit is having strong knowledge of how you're going to generate strong demand. So you know exactly who the buyers are, you know exactly what products or services they buy, the price points that they purchase at, and how frequently they purchase. Why has it become so important to feed this back into lead generation? Because it's all connected. And in a digital buyer's journey, the better job we can do with staying with someone throughout the entire journey, the better our company does. It's also super important to drive alignment throughout your company. So you make sure that marketing seamlessly connects with sales, sales seamlessly connects with customer success seamlessly connects with product, and gives you a virtuous cycle of happy clients that expand, no retention risks, and help drive positive digital word of mouth to fuel your lead generation program. So let me see if we have any other questions. Okay, great. That looks like the last one that was sent in ahead of time and the last one that was covered in the chat pane. If you have any further questions on data center lead generation 101 best practices, you'll be getting a follow-up email shortly with a survey. We'd encourage you to take that. We'd love to get your feedback. Feel free to reply to that. You can also visit our website anytime at dcsmi.com, and you'll find a live chat button on most pages on the website. You can feel free to engage with someone from our team as well. With that, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. I'm so glad that you're able to join us today for Data Center Lead Generation 101. We wish you great success in growing your business, and let us know how we can help. Take care now and enjoy the rest of your day.